All right, everyone, we're live. I just want to say thank you guys so much for tuning in. Whether if you're watching live on YouTube or you're going to be watching later on in the day. I appreciate everyone for coming in, just giving a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds for people to just join us before we head into the main bulk of the live stream. Before we get started, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Joel Mark Francisco. I'm part of the Goodwin team with Corcoran Legends Realty, and I'll be introducing in a little bit some of my team members. And essentially, our goal is really to break down what the home buying process is here in Westchester. Let me just pull up my slide over here. And essentially, we are real estate agents, and we're real estate agents licensed in New York. So different states might have different rules and process. That's why right now we're just honing down just in Westchester, New York, because that's pretty much where we essentially service. Now, other areas, even in Westchester, can have different variations, and it all comes down to what your criteria is, what your search is, and your situation. So right now, we're just going to give you a general essence of what the home buying process is, and even talk about some tips later on about being able to prepare with the fall market. So to get that started, again, my name is Joel Francisco. I've been in real estate for around, I would say, maybe around 4 years into the business, and I'm part of the Goodwin team. And I'm joined by two other members of the Goodwin team, Debra Goodwin and Ionata. So right now, Debra, I'm going to put you on stage, and can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Oh, sure, Joel. Thanks for the introduction. I've been in the business at least 17 years, going on 18 years, and I'm in the River Towns area in New York, right north of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about a half an hour to 45-minute commute from our area. And I raised my family here and love it here, and enjoy the real estate business thoroughly and tremendously, and happy to have a team and excited to be with all of you today.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you so much. And I also have Laura. Laura, just give me one more second. I'm going to put you on stage. Hi, Laura. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes. How are you? Can you hear me?
I'm doing well. Well, thank you for joining in. Can you just tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Laura Ionata, and I'm a proud member of the Goodwin team. I started in real estate in the city in about 2012 and transitioned up to Westchester about 5 years ago. And I live in Ossining. I know Westchester really well at this point, and I really love living up here and would love to help anybody make that move.
That's perfect. That's perfect. And thank you so much for the introduction, also pointing out that you also work in the city as well. So I definitely know we're probably going to have some viewers. So it's always great. Anyone that's watching, if you want to get our contact information, it's in the description box below. You can definitely contact us if you have any specific questions or really just want to get started. So thank you, Laura. I'm going to put you back on backstage, and we'll get started. Okay. All right, guys. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about the home buying process here in Westchester. And with the whole home buying process, it definitely is a journey. There's several steps that you might be encountering. Now, not everyone's situation is always the same. So again, this is just general steps. But if you have any questions, definitely feel free to comment below. And also don't forget to like and subscribe this video. We'll definitely be doing more live streams in the future. And who knows, maybe some of your questions might be our next video topic. So to begin, we always like to start with beginning with the search. Now, the first step can always be interchangeable. It kind of depends on how familiar you are with Westchester. Now, over here, we're talking about choosing your guide and essentially the real estate agent themselves. If you do not know anyone, the best person to be able to speak with is a real estate agent, because that person's not only going to be helping you with understanding the market, but also going to be that connection to other people that's going to be working with you. Who knows, you might be having to need to work with a mortgage lender or a mortgage broker, a real estate attorney, inspectors, contractors, cleaners, so on and so forth. And with that real estate agent, that not someone that you know, but also someone that you like, and most importantly, trust. And that's why it's also important not just to speak with one real estate agent, but also to multiple real estate agents. They might have the same experience and knowledge, but it's very important to have someone that can connect with you in a level where you can communicate properly and things that can be understood in a well-mannered. And also with being able to find that right real estate agent, going into that is it makes the process a lot smoother in terms of, again, going into understanding the finance of things. If there's a legal matter, they can be able to bring you to a real estate attorney and be able to direct you to be able to make that step in a confident way. So going into the next step, and this one can be really interchangeable to say, is really getting the finances ready. And with that being said, is that you might need to be talking to a mortgage lender, or you might have a financial advisor. If you're going to be speaking with a mortgage lender, it's always best to be able to get what's called a pre-approval. That pre-approval can really help you understand not just your budget, but most importantly, your buying power, especially here in Westchester. It can be very competitive. And so by being able to understand how much you can place down in an offer, which Laura will talk about the offer stage in a little bit, but going into being able to put in or understanding your mortgage or your buying power, that can help you in many ways, and also just narrowing down what the properties you're going to be looking for. And that goes into the third part, which everyone always loves, which is starting the home search. So the home search, your real estate agent is going to give you, after the pre-consultation meeting, a consultation meeting of kind of understanding what the market is all about. And they'll be asking you tons of questions of what you're looking for in terms of the house in itself, whether it's the number of bedrooms, style, if you want a big backyard, a pool, or most importantly, the location as well. The location is a big part in kind of how you're going to be using the space and using the area, because you might be moving either for a reason of a certain school zone that you want to get into, or for work-related reasons, or just because you want to be going into Westchester. And so your real estate agent is going to help you set up a search, where from there, you're going to be able to get what either going to see properties at an open house, you're going to be seeing properties at a tour. So essentially, this whole search process is really going to set you up to be able to find your dream home. And at that point, once you're able to find your dream home, from there, the great thing is that you're going to be placing in an offer. So Laura, I'm going to bring you on stage right now. Give me one moment. So Laura, at this point, our buyers, we've gone through the process of setting them up on an auto search. We already have a pre-approval on hand. We've seen several houses here and there, and they found one that fits their search criteria. So can you explain what the process is like of making an offer? What happens when you get an accepted offer, and kind of the next steps after that?
Absolutely. So the first process would be submitting your offer. And navigating this process is going to depend on the market. If it's a seller's market or a buyer's market, that's going to inform, how we move through this process. Obviously, if it's a buyer's market and there's a lot of inventory, perhaps, the buyer is going to have a bit more leverage in terms of where they're going to make their offer, or what sort of price they may make their offer. If it's a seller's market and there's a lot of competition for the property, that's going to change things quite a bit. There may be a need to come up over the asking price potentially, and in some cases significantly, depending on the product.
And then at that point, so now you mentioned something about it all depends on the type of market that we're in, whether if we're in a buyer's market or a seller's market. Yes. And right now here in Westchester, we're in a seller's market just because there are a lot more buyers that are searching for homes in such limited supply. And therefore the sellers have more kind of, in a way, more control in terms of how negotiation is going to be working on. Now, when it comes time to making an offer and being very competitive, as a real estate agent, what do you do to figure out, because it's not just about price, correct? In terms of an offer, what are other things that are needed to make a strong offer?
Absolutely. So there's a few ways that we can position ourselves to have a very competitive offer that can be compelling enough to, of course, for the owner, the seller to accept. And these are the terms, as you said, other than price. Of course, having a high price can certainly be very compelling, but there are other things that can make the offer really desirable and attractive for the seller. And that could be the down payment. If the buyer is in a position to put down a substantial down payment, perhaps 30, 40, 50%, that can be very attractive. An all cash deal, of course, would be very, very compelling, since this would be a much quicker process. And we can maybe get into that at some point. But also other terms. If the buyer is confident in the condition of the property, or if they don't have any sort of concern with what the condition may be, regardless of what it is, they may waive their inspection, which could mean one of two things. Either they don't inspect at all, or they bring an inspector in to understand what they're getting into, but they know that it's just going to be for their information only, and there's not going to be any further negotiation. So that can definitely be a term that can be very attractive to the seller. There are other things that can be waived, such as the financing contingency or appraisal, which would make their offer strong as well. And that's something that they should discuss at length with their attorney and their lender to make sure that's something that they'd be comfortable doing.
Yeah, no, there's definitely a lot of components when it comes time to making an offer. And it's not just with the terms that you listed or the price as well, but it's also how it's presented. Every
Absolutely.
real estate agent, as you know, also being on the listing side of things, real estate agents, they give offers in very unique ways, per se, either with a PDF document that has everything down or an email even here and there. And unfortunately, there are also some times when that email can be very distracting or it's not as clear, which at the same time, it's going to be a reason kind of not wanting to work with that person, because it's going to be a little bit more of extra steps that maybe either the sellers would have to be doing because of how things are delivered.
That's right. There shouldn't be any questions. When the buyer's agent presents their offer, it should be very, very clear, whether that's in bullet points in the body of the email, or if they have a spreadsheet. As long as what they present is very, very clear and organized and makes sense, and there are no questions, that's the ideal scenario. You really want to have someone who understands all the different elements that they must present. There's no confusion and no questions from the seller. They understand exactly what you're offering.
Yeah, no, that's fair. And then that goes into my stage one of the things of when you're looking for a real estate agent, is to find someone that not just like trust, but also has knowledge in the field. And that knowledge has to be expressed in a way where everyone understands essentially everything. And it's also, there's times when if there's going to be a question that's going to be asked, it's important that our buyers are comfortable asking us those questions.
Absolutely.
Because they don't want to be at any hesitation. Because at the end of the day, as you know, our goal is to be able to service our clients, making sure that they make that confident decision. So you explained already the essence of what an offer is and how it's delivered. Now, when we have an accepted offer, what does that really mean here in Westchester?
Well, what it means is you have a meeting of the minds between the seller and the buyer. The seller has accepted the offer in good faith. The buyer is, moving forward on those terms. But nothing is set in stone until the contract is signed. So either party could change their mind and move in a different direction. And the buyer could decide on a different property. The seller could decide on a different buyer. So it's important that once we get an accepted offer on the buy side, we move forward quickly, but yet efficiently, to get the signed contract so that we do have a deal that's more or less, locked in. So that's why it's essential that we align ourselves with an excellent attorney who is going to do all of the proper due diligence between accepted offer and contract as quickly as possible, but without leaving any, without cutting any corners, making sure that everything is done correctly.
Yeah, definitely.
But as quickly as possible, so that there's no delays and there's no lost time.
Yeah, no, you're right. And then another thing that you mentioned is with kind of doing your homework or the due diligence. Now, not a lot of real estate agents do this for their clients. Can you explain kind of what we do as the Goodwin team, help with our clients kind of doing the due diligence work before getting contracts are signed, of course?
Sure, of course. So the first thing that we're going to do once we get an accepted offer is we're going to line up our inspection or inspections if there's multiple things that need to be inspected. And we want to do that, especially in the competitive market. We want to do that as quickly as humanly possible, ideally within 24 to 48 hours. Believe it or not, I know that sounds really, really quick, but the buyer really should, if they can, they got to prioritize this. And if they need to take a day off work, it's important with an investment like this to try and make that happen and get the inspection done, a day after the accepted offer if they can. That's going to be the biggest thing that we're going to do. But in addition to that, what we're going to do as their agent, we're going to visit the building department of the town or city, and we're going to review all of the records on file for the property. We're going to We're going to get the survey if there is one, and we're going to make sure that there are no violations or open permits at the property. If there are, we will make the seller's agent aware just in case they're not, so that the seller can take care of those items and get those permits closed before we close on the transaction. In addition to that, we'll also verify the taxes and the property card and just make sure everything is as it should be and all the numbers make sense, and we provide all of the information to the buyer so they know exactly what they're getting into before they sign the contract.
Yeah, I know that's definitely an important part of kind of being able to show our buyers what they're getting into, because a lot of the times when we place in an offer, our clients have only seen that property once, either through a showing or an open house, and they don't always have the chance to see that property again because of how things move here in Westchester. You see a property listed on the market, and next thing you know, the following week after their open house, they're doing a highest and best situation because they have 2, 3, and I've seen situations where they have 10 offers even. It all depends on how the property is marketed, how it's priced to its condition, or the condition is to its price. And so with the due diligence work, it's definitely additional work that we do as real estate agents to provide for our clients. At the same time, your real estate attorney will also be doing the same thing, just because as you know, when we go to these building departments, we have to put in what's called a FOIL request in order to get these building permits or just documentation about the property. And that unfortunately doesn't happen right away. Sometimes the FOIL request can take a week or 2 weeks, but at least there's some sort of information that we can possibly get for our clients to keep moving forward. And if there's any concerns at that point, we can always bring up our real estate attorney. And so thank you so much, Laura. I'm going to actually bring in Deb, who's going to be talking about the contracts, and I'll definitely get back to you in a little bit. So Deb, now you're on the stage. So we placed it in the offer, we got accepted, and we did our due diligence work. Does that mean we get the keys and we close at that point, or what's the next step?
Yeah, finding the home is the first challenge, but that's really when the process begins, the process of actually being able to buy the home and close on it. So at the very beginning, when you're meeting with your agent, and we provide this service, and other agents do as well, we provide inspector names, we provide attorney names. And so the reason that it's important to start thinking about an inspector or an attorney at the beginning is so that way, when you do find the perfect home, you get an accepted offer, you can inspect right away, as Laura said, and also you can contact an attorney right away. In New York, and this part of New York where we practice real estate, it's pretty much required that you have an attorney that represents your interests as a buyer. The seller has an attorney that represents their interests. The seller's attorney draws up the contract, sends it to your attorney, and then you meet with your attorney to discuss the terms of the contract. So that could take a couple of days, but it's best if you've already chosen an attorney, interviewed the attorney, find out, what is he charging? Is it a flat rate? Is it an hourly rate? It's just really good to be prepared. And also when you're choosing an attorney, it's really important to make sure they're not going on vacation, make sure they're available. And also if they've been referred to you, most likely they're also an attorney that does return calls and is willing to communicate with his or her clients. It's really important to have an open line of communication. Now, when everything's going beautifully and perfect, that's not as critical. But when there's an issue, or if something comes up that needs to be negotiated, maybe there's a fence that's out of bounds, or maybe there's something that's encroaching on the property you're buying, that's really when you need an attorney to help you through the legalities of those items and maybe possible negotiations with the sellers or with the neighbors. So anyway, once you, like I said, once you have the accepted offer, then the contracts and you've inspected and everything's ready to go, then the seller's attorney will send your attorney a contract. And then that's when you sit down with your attorney and go over all those terms.
Yeah, and then at that point, hopefully the contract can be signed, which can really solidify the deal, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily done. It's just the next step into getting into the closing or the meeting of minds that Laura talked about. But for some people, when you have a mortgage, kind of what's the next step after contract is signed, Deb?
Yes. Oh, and then one other thing I remember, Joel, the other thing everybody should know is that even though you've got an accepted offer, you've done inspections, the contracts are out. Until you've signed those contracts and the seller has countersigned the contracts, that seller can negotiate offers up until that point. So you have to realize that, and that's one of the things that Laura talked about. It's very important once you have an accepted offer to inspect fairly quickly, because there will be other people, there probably will be other people pursuing that property. So just so you know, just because you have an accepted offer verbally, that doesn't really mean anything until the contracts are signed. The other thing I wanted to bring up, and Joel might be bringing this up later, I'm not sure, but when you give a closing date in our area of New York and on most contracts, if you have an on or about date, you still have 30 days beyond that date that you could potentially close. So just because somebody says you're going to close September 1st, you could close as late as October 1st. And it would still be within the contractual obligation. So don't schedule your movers until you have what's called a clear to close, but that's a whole nother subject. So anyway, back now, Joel, I've forgotten the question. About
the mortgage process. Once we got contract signed, but
okay, sorry.
No worries,
Okay,
but I want to put a pause on that actually.
Pardon?
I want to put a pause on that because you explained a very important tip regarding of the importance of getting contracts signed, because it can go really fast, the entire process. And if you don't have the resources, or you don't have anyone lined up right away, like you never talk to an inspector, for example, or you never talk to a real estate attorney, unfortunately, you might find that house, but then lose it at the same time, even though you have an accepted offer. Because as Debra mentioned, that the seller still has the opportunity to be able to talk with other potential buyers that might already have a backup offer in mind. And because the sellers themselves, they have to move at a certain time, they have to move fast as well, or they might be going through certain situations that requires things to go really fast. So again, this process of you putting in accepted offers to contracts signed can take a matter of a week or 2 weeks, probably the latest here in Westchester. And so it's going to go back again to my very first step of making sure that you find that right real estate agent. Because as Deb mentioned, that our resources are people that we've worked with in the past that have helped us, and either we had a smooth transaction or there's bumps in the roads that they're able to assist with, and they're able to understand how to navigate it because they had the experience. And also, most important is communication. Debra and I have talked to other real estate agents, or have gone through a lot of transactions together where unfortunately some people are just not communicating, and that's where we come in and try to reel everything in to making sure that everything's done in a timely manner, because of how fast real estate can move here in Westchester because of the demand and supply of things. Now, going back into the topic, so we have contracts signed, and for some people, you might have a mortgage involved in this process. So, what do the buyers have to do at this point once contracts are signed regarding their mortgage?
Okay, so you've got a pre-approval because you needed a pre-approval to even start looking for homes.
Mm-hmm.
The thing you can do now is you can go back to that same bank or that mortgage person or that lender and go ahead and move forward with that lender. Or you can also shop around a little bit. Just because you have a pre-approval from one bank does not mean you have to stay with that bank. But you also, with everything, if you find a good person to work with, a good mortgage person, that's worth a lot too. Again, obviously you're not going to pay an extra % of interest because the guy's a nice guy, but it's important to have a mortgage person who's there and has your back as well. So anyway, at this point, then let's just say you decided to go ahead and move forward with the bank that gave you the pre-approval,
Mm-hmm.
you would let the bank know, you let your mortgage person know. You would need to provide additional documentation of your income and all of that, as well as you would probably have to put down or pay for an appraisal. The appraisal of the property you're buying would be ordered, and it would be ordered through that bank that you're getting the loans from. And that would be pretty much the first step after you have a contract, is to have the appraisal, because the bank wants to, of course, protect their interests. So if you're borrowing $1 million, they want to make sure that house is worth at least $1 million. And depending on how much you're putting down, it could be worth, they're only they'll probably loan you 80% of the value of the home, but they just need to know its value. So you get the appraisal. The appraisal then takes about a week. Your agent would meet the appraiser at the house. It takes about a week to process. Then the bank gets that appraisal back and says, yep, this is good, or no, it's not appraising. You're paying too much for this house. At that point in time, depending on the market and circumstances, you sometimes can renegotiate the price, and sometimes deals fall apart at that point, because a lot of times buyers are like, no, that it scares them off. They're like, oh my gosh, this house isn't worth what I've offered for it, or what I've agreed verbally to pay for it. You can also ask for a second appraisal. That would be another option. But let's just say it appraises properly and you're ready to go ahead. Well, then the bank has a whole process that it can take anywhere from 30 to 60 days. And generally, it's pretty rare that from the 30 days from contract signing for you to close, that would be pretty rare. It's usually around 45 or 60 days from closing. And the bank does all of their underwriting, and then you get to a point where you get a commitment letter that bank says, yes, we're committed to lending this person. These are the only outstanding things that need to be done. And then eventually you get what's called a clear to close, which then you can go ahead and set the closing date. When I say you can go ahead and set the closing day, I should correct it. The only people who can really set that closing day are the attorneys and the bank attorney. The real estate agents and the buyers, we can request dates, but we can't actually book the closing, and we don't have as much control over it as the attorneys do. So once you get your closing day, then it's important to have a final walkthrough at the home that you're buying, or home or apartment or condo. You want to make sure that the home or the property is as you saw it during the inspection at a minimum. You want to make sure the appliances are working. There's no water intrusions. There are no major changes to the landscaping. I mean, one time I had a case where they went to the walkthrough, and the sellers had cut down a row of trees in their backyard, which gave privacy to the neighbors. Kept this house private from the neighbors. The buyers went to see that house and do the walkthrough. They look out in their backyard, and all of a sudden it was no longer a private backyard. All of the trees and hedges had been cut down completely.
Oh my gosh.
The deal fell apart. They never, they didn't go forward with that purchase. I wasn't representing them at the time. They came to me after that, but it was very interesting that a seller would do that. That's a material change to the property. Anyway, so you want the property to be somewhat like it was when you did the inspection, and then if all is well, then you go to the closing.
Yeah, and now we definitely went by with a lot of points and last steps to get to closing, and the reason for that is because this is like the best case scenario. Unfortunately, even though we've done tons of transaction, there's always something that comes up. Whether if it's the first part of even searching, there might be a situation where there's not enough listings available that fits your criteria. Or when you get an accepted offer, all of a sudden the seller decides to accept a different offer, and then we have to start the process all over again. Or when we get to contract to sign, for example, what Deb mentioned, the sellers change something up about the house, which to them might seem a little bit small, but to you, it's definitely going to be a place where you're going to be living in the future, and most importantly, creating long-lasting memories. And the reason why you place in the offer is most likely because you love the privacy that it has compared to other properties that you've seen on the market. So there's a lot of things that we can go into, which we're not going to go into today, of course, because it's not going to be a 30-minute or 45-minute live stream. It's going to be an all-day adventure, talking about every single detail. And also, I know Laura has a ton of stories, but that essentially is the steps, which per se. And again, take these as guiding markers, not necessarily we're going to be following everything to the T, just because everyone's situation is always different. Deb explained the situation where if you have a mortgage, then you're going to have to go through an extra mortgage process. But if you don't, you're just dealing with cash, then you won't have to go through an appraisal situation or get that mortgage commitment letter, because it's going to be you that's going to be supplying the funds. But if this is just single family house, now if we were to go with a co-op or condo, Laura definitely has a lot of experience in this situation of like, you're going to have to put in an additional step of that purchase application. And that might be another live stream video that we're going to definitely make in the future. But as promised, we're going to also be talking about what the fall market is. So Laura, I'm going to actually bring you back on stage. Can you explain to our viewers what the fall market is here in Westchester?
Absolutely. So the fall market is sort of a bump in time between Labor Day and I would say the middle of November. There's a little bit of a rush. There's usually, and it's pretty typical for every year to sort of look like this, where there's a rush of sort of new activity. There's some new listings that will come to market, and buyers will come out that are very excited to see, the new inventory. It's very different though from the spring market. The spring market tends to be a lot longer. It starts from March until May or June, and it could even start even in February, depending if the weather is a little bit more on the mild side. It can be fairly long, and it's a very intense process. So the fall market is going to be a lot shorter. So it's not going to be quite as intense, but the buyers are very serious because they typically have been, obviously it's case by case, but for the most part, they've been sort of looking for a while. Maybe they didn't get something from the spring market. Maybe they were, made some offers and they were not able to get an accepted offer. So the buyers for the fall market are much more serious, which is great. Things slow down pretty substantially in mid-November, starting like maybe the week before Thanksgiving. It's a very slow time typically. I mean, obviously there can be exceptions, but for the most part, from mid-November until like after New Year's is usually very slow. But the fall market is a nice little pocket of about 2 months of activity where it's a great time to get in and see some new inventory and potentially get something before the end of the year.
Yeah, no, that's a great point about new inventory. Now, with that being said, every month there's always going to be new listings that come up. It just so happened that we can go over data about this. Is that year over year you always see more listings, for say, to pop up around September, which you mentioned after Labor Day. But with that being said, if you're a buyer that's looking now and you have to move in now, it doesn't hurt to actually begin the process, because at that point you're also more prepared and being able to okay, I know my inspector, I know my real estate attorney, I have a sense of the terms that I want to offer, as well as how to be competitive, which is very important, especially when you have multiple offers on a property, where you can definitely zone in and kind of focus what you really want to be looking into, and especially location, because
absolutely.
So
yeah, it's never too soon to get prepared. So you can certainly get prepared in August in anticipation of the fall market. August is, for the most part, is one of the slower months of the year. July and August can be slow. A lot of people go away. A lot of the buyers are away, sellers, even the real estate professionals sometimes will go away. That's how slow it can typically be in that month. But there can be exceptions. Like for me, for example, this August happens to be a little bit busier for me than perhaps previous Augusts have been. I would say overall, though, it's usually a little bit slower. The folks that want to get in to something before the school year starts usually have already gotten something at this point, or they sign a contract, maybe at the very beginning of the month, and then the rest of August is on the slower side. So if you want to get into the fall market, this August can be a great time to sort of get prepared, because it's more quiet. You don't have to worry about running out and seeing all these new listings because they haven't really come up yet.
Yeah, exactly. Now, talking about preparedness, Deb, I'm going to put you back on stage. Now, what is a tip for say for buyers out there who want to get into the fall market? What is something that you can help them with, an advice or a tip that you can provide with them?
Well, I think it's important to make sure they have a pre-approval, because the spring market was very, very competitive. Now I'm not sure what the fall market will be, but generally the fall market's not quite as competitive. But I would definitely say have a pre-approval, and then just be prepared. Right after Labor Day, the very next day, you'll start to see properties come on the market. And we know that partially because we have listings that will come on after Labor Day ourselves. So if we have listings, other agents have listings as well. So it's probably a good time to buy. And it's also a good time for families that don't need to worry about getting their kids into school. Or even local families say they maybe want to upsize. Maybe you're living in a community and you're in a townhouse or a condo and you really would love a single family home. And maybe your children are in school, so you don't want to move areas. The fall is a good time to just sort of upsize within your own community.
Yeah, preparedness is such an important thing. And it's something I always tell my friends or my colleagues that are just interested and not ready to make that move yet, of just get a pre-approval just to see where you are at the moment. And then from there, you can kind of set certain markers or set certain steps for you to be able to purchase that home in the future. The one that you definitely like and one that you can build upon memories. So Laura, I'm going to bring you back on stage on can you also provide with our viewers another tip that you might have for people that are going to be purchasing in the fall market?
Oh, absolutely. One thing could be to pay close attention to things that could come up in the fall winter season. So if you're buying in the fall market, you're maybe making an offer and signing a contract on something in September or early October. The weather is still really nice. Don't forget, the winter season is right around the corner. So you really want to make sure that you're checking the heating system, the insulation, things like that in the home that could really impact, your quality of life as the months go on when you're in the home. It's not something people often maybe think about if the weather's still really nice, but you want to keep that in mind if that's right around the corner. And especially the windows too. I think checking the windows at the property will be a good tip to make sure that you're not going to be experiencing any of those cold winter drafts.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. And I know you guys are going to have to head out soon because real estate is always moving, as we know. Even though we're sitting here, deals are happening and inspections are going and sales are to be made more. And so I'm going to be closing this presentation soon. I just want to remind everyone again that this is something that you can come back to over time and be able to look at this live stream. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment in the comment section below. And who knows, your questions might be our next video topic, as well as this is definitely going to be a live stream that we're going to be doing more often, definitely for this year. I'm also putting a little presentation of what you can be able to do and also just be able to understand the home buying process. Again, my name is Joel Francisco. I'm part of the Goodwin team. If you have any questions, you can definitely look at our contact information down below. And thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care, and we hope you guys have an amazing day. Bye-bye.